The Senate will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Senators Baisley, Bridges, Buckner, Coleman, Cutter, Danielson, Exum, Fields, Gardner, Janal, Gonzalez, Hansen, Henriksen, Jaquez Lewis, Kirkmeyer, Coker, Liston, Lundin, Marchman, Moreno, Mullica, Pelton B, Pelton R, Priola, Rich, Roberts, Rodriguez, Simpson, Smallwood, Sullivan, Van Winkle, Will, Winter, Zenzinger. Mr. President.
Here. Morning roll call is 35 present, 0 absent, 0 excused. We do have a quorum. Will the good senator from Grand Junction please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the Journal. Senator Priola.
Morning, Mr. President. Members, I move that the Senate Journal of Friday, February 25th, 2023 be approved and corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no? It's really close, but I think the ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. Senate Services.
February 27, 2023, correctly engrossed Senate Joint Memorial 2, correctly re-engrossed Senate Bill 76.
Committee reports.
February 23, 2023, the Committee on Legal Services, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following Senate Bill 102 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Message from the House.
February 24, 2023, Mr. President, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the Reviser of Statutes House Bills 1139, 1140, printed as amended as printed in House Journal February 23, 2023. The House has passed on third reading and returns herewith Senate Bill 40.
Message from the Reviser.
February 24, 2023, we herewith transmit without comment as amended House Bill 1139 and 1140.
Introduction of resolutions. Majority Leader, introduction of resolutions.
Senate Joint Resolution 6, Senators Cutter and Buckner, Representatives Froelich and English, concerning the effort to acknowledge and enshrine in the Constitution the rights of women in the United States.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Joint Resolution 6 lay over until Wednesday, March 1st.
The motion is to lay over Senate Joint Resolution 6 to Wednesday, March 1st. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Joint Resolution 6 will lay over until Wednesday, March 1st. Members, we have a very special constituent of mine here in the building, the one and only Senator Matt Jones. Please welcome back to the Senate. Yeah, he didn't used to be my constituent, but he is now, whether he likes it or not. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. There has been a request to remove House Bill 1014 from the consent calendar, members that will be placed at the bottom of the general orders second reading of bills calendar.
General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of General Orders second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. The Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the General Orders second reading of bills, and Senator Winter will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the coat rule is relaxed. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over Senate Bill 78 to tomorrow, February 28th.
Seeing no objection, Senate Bill 78 will be laid over until 2/28. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 61?
Senate Bill 61, Senators Marchman, Representative Kipp, and Lukens, concerning eliminating the requirement that the Department of Education administer a state assessment in social studies.
Senator Marchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 61 and the Appropriation Committee report.
To the Appropriations
And the
Committee.
Education report.
To the Appropriations Committee report. Oh, education.
Education.
Sorry, it was loud. I couldn't hear.
Education first, sorry.
To the Education Committee report.
And thank you, Madam Chair. The Education Committee heard the bill, and one amendment was added, which was L001. Is that all I say?
Is there any further discussion on the Education Committee report? Seeing none, the Education Committee report is adopted.
Now
To the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Appropriations Committee met and specified that the cash funds for this will stay in the State Education Fund.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report?
Stevens?
Seeing none, any objection to the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill.
Now I speak.
Senator Marchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colorado students are over-tested. The Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015 reduced federal testing mandates, but Colorado requires testing beyond federal requirements for elementary and middle schoolers ages 8 through 14. Colorado children spend 9 to 13 hours per year in standardized testing. Federal law requires ELA, math, and science tests. Colorado law requires social studies tests. Eliminating the social studies statewide assessment could reduce negative impacts of testing on students, improved opt-in rates for other tests, and narrow post-pandemic recovery focus around ELA and STEM. What will SB 61 do? It will eliminate statewide assessment in social studies, and it'll leave $1.025 million in the State Education Fund to reinvest. How could the state best reinvest these savings? We have a lot of options. One thing we heard of is we would like to support high-quality social studies instruction. We'd like to improve participation rates on other tests, and we'd like to measure growth in science. This is a bill that was unanimously approved by the State Board of Education. It is something that will impact our students in a direct way, and I urge an aye vote.
Sarah Kolker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Senate Bill 61, I have jumped on to co-sponsor this bill after the second reading, hopefully, and would like to make sure that people understand this does not mean we're going to stop testing in social studies or make social studies any less important. Right now, social studies is tested limited amounts in elementary and middle school. It is not tested consecutively every year. There are samples given, and there's not much that is being done with those tests. If you think about social studies, as a former social studies teacher, social studies encompasses so many different areas, not just civics, not just American history or world history, but psychology, economics. It encompasses geography. This is more than just rote memorization, and teachers are testing for social studies on a daily basis in schools. But they're not just testing based on the reading ability of their students. They're testing using portfolios, using presentations, using your regular tests that you would normally see. Those are different ways to measure growth, and they're getting an immediate assessment, their immediate impact, immediate feedback on how successful they're being. So, again, want to emphasize, testing is still happening, but it's happening at the local level. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Sarah Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To the bill, Senate Bill 61. In committee, well, let me back up and say this. Tests are kind of a threshold element. They help us understand exactly where we're at. This particular bill has had several summative tests, final tests already. It had a test in the Education Committee, and it passed out. It had a test in the Appropriations Committee that said, we'll give you some money back if you let us out, and it passed out of that committee as well. So now it stands before us, and the question is, shall we test this or not? It's kind of like life. The reality is the things we care most about, we test. And the level of the test, the weight of the test, defines exactly how much we actually care about a certain element. Well, in committee, the assertion was made that social studies still matters, we care about it, civics still matters, we care about it, but we don't want any longer to have it be part of the battery of tests that we offer up on behalf of the students of Colorado to help them understand and to signal to them that which is most important. We still test on English language arts, we still test on math, we still test on science, but we no longer will be testing as a state on social studies, on civics. Well, my argument is that if you don't test it, it ultimately, over time, won't be taught. It diminishes the value by virtue of the weight of the test that you're removing from it. Well, in committee, as we were hearing this bill, and at the last minute, a surprise amendment was offered up to everybody in the committee, and it was a new legislative declaration. And it said something that I think is just an abject denial of the facts. The legislative declaration, which was tossed on the bill at the last minute as the bill came out of the Ed Committee, it said, the General Assembly declares that eliminating the requirement of the Colorado Department of Education to administer a state assessment in social studies neither eliminates educational standards for instructional areas related to social studies, nor eliminates the value or significance of social studies. Well, I'm not certain that that is exactly what we're doing here. In fact, I think what we're doing here is the exact opposite of that. What is a law but a statement, a signal, an indication to everyone in Colorado that which is important or not important? So I'm offering an amendment. Would like to offer an amendment. At some point, I will offer an amendment.
There is an amendment on the desk.
And since the amendment's on the desk, we'll get to it.
Will the clerk please read Amendment L002?
Amendment L002 by Senator Lundin, amend the Education
Sarah
Committee report
Lundin.
dated February.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L002 to Senate Bill 061. It's a very simple amendment. It redirects the legislative declaration. The legislative declaration says this neither eliminates the value of nor the significance of. I say au contraire. The reality is this does, in fact, diminish the value. And so I would offer this amendment that simply says, to be clear, in the law we're passing, that the signal we are now sending is that we believe that removing this test does, in fact, diminish the importance of social studies, the significance of social studies to the people of Colorado. So it's just a truth in lending. truth in legislating, if you will, amendment that simply says, we're not going to test it anymore because we, even though many would argue in this time of challenge when civics is incredibly important, in this time of civil behavior governed by the laws and the behaviors and the attitudes that we can inculcate into our children as they grow up, as we hopefully help those children understand who we are as a society, how we have this remarkable opportunity to govern ourselves that is embedded in the civics of our society, that in fact it's incredibly important to us, and therefore we will test that particular line of education and opportunity for children. So, Madam Chair, I have moved the amendment, and I urge an aye vote from this chamber on Amendment L002 to Senate Bill 61.
Sarah Marchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the good senator from Monument. As I understand legislative declarations, they're a thesis to the bill, and I stand by the thesis to my bill that reducing the statewide assessments does not reduce the value or the instruction of social studies in the states. I'd urge a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on L002? Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I, of course, argue the contrary. If I've got these keys in my pocket, this billfold in my pocket, if my thesis is, if I suspend this in the air, it will stay suspended in the air. That's my thesis. But we all know that's not what's going to happen. I don't want my $3.46 that I have in my billfold to fall on the floor, so I'm not actually going to drop this. But the reality is, just because I want it to be so does not make it so. And I argue that this legislative declaration, which we all know does not have the force of law, but this bill is all about signaling. It's about signaling what we care about, what we don't care about. And the reality is, I think we are sending a signal that says we don't care adequately about civics, we don't care adequately about social studies, and so I urge your support of Amendment L002.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L002? Seeing none, all those in favor of L002 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and L002 is lost. To the bill. Senator Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I also sit on the Education Committee, and we covered this bill at length. I'm going to end up reading half of the bill today. It's just a single page. But to clarify what this bill is setting out to accomplish and to bring the light on it, as I believe is appropriate for us in this conversation right now. So current language in Volume 22 states that the Department of Education, in collaboration with local education providers, shall administer the state assessments in the instructional areas of 4 areas: English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. This bill proposes to eliminate one of those 4, which is social studies, of course. What it would eliminate is the following language. The department shall administer a state assessment in social studies to students enrolled in public elementary and middle schools throughout the state. The department shall select the specific grades in which to administer the state social studies assessment, ensuring that students take the state social studies assessment once in elementary school and once in middle school. The department shall administer the social studies assessment required by this subsection in a representative sample of public schools each school year, ensuring that it administers the social studies assessment in each public school at least once every 3 years. Excuse me. A school district for one or more of the schools of the school district that are not included in the representative sample, or a charter school that is not included in the representative sample, may request that the department administer the assessment in the district school or charter school. The department shall administer the social studies assessment in the requested school in the school year following the school year in which it receives the request. So this bill would remove that language, leaving the similar language for the other 3 of language arts, mathematics, and science intact, removing those instructions for testing from just this one area, social studies. And we have a saying in the engineering world that what gets measured gets accomplished. This social studies is not going to get accomplished if not measured. And how important is that up against the other three? Well, language arts certainly is important to all of us in communication, but the other three are representative of the three major branches of science. The formal sciences, represented in mathematics, the natural sciences, representative in science, and then the social sciences, represented in social studies. So we're going to eliminate an entire branch of science in its study for what gain? For a savings of $1.5 million, which is barely noticeable as even a speed bump within the entire educational institution and the entire budget of billions of dollars. So what are we trying to do? We certainly diminish that entire third branch of science, and it also opens a door, which is my biggest concern, of eliminating the education of founding principles, American founding principles for our students, for making that important, and allowing, because there will be no test to validate and to hold it in check, allowing some of the damaging historical revisionism to come into play, like the big lie known as 1619 Project. That's the kind of thing that's going to begin creeping in because there will be no standardized test to test away from that. We need to have, our students need to understand the unique, advantageous, and historically unique characteristics of the nation that they were born into. All of those inalienable rights that are found in our founding document. That's what's so incredibly important for us to be teaching and to be testing. I can see eliminating maybe language arts if you want to save money. Maybe not advisable, but if I'm going to rank these 1, 2, 3, and 4, social studies would be way at the top of the agenda, and the rest of them would have to follow afterward. I think this is a terrific mistake, and we ought to raise up the level of importance of our social studies and not diminish it by taking away all of the testing towards it. So for all those reasons, I would ask for a no vote on this bill.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too serve on the Education Committee and heard this bill in committee. And this is from the Social Studies Standards that was revised in 2022. These are exceedingly formative years where our students are learning not only content, but how to think. Critical thinking skills are at the forefront of our state's social studies curriculum. Our standards currently include a focus on inquiry-based social studies, where students learn through investigation, similar to the kinds of investigation that happen in experiment-based science classes. Investigations start with a question that students explore as they learn. Then they gather evidence from different sources to help them answer the question. I was a no vote in committee. I'll be a no vote today. Taking away the assessment tool for such knowledge undermines the knowledge itself. Requiring an assessment for these skills ensures students are learning those critical thinking skills. I hope you will join me in a no vote. Thank you.
Sarah Marchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So annual statewide assessment, particularly assessments that provide results that can be disaggregated, are a critical tool in the fight for equity. Prior to the federal requirements, assessments were hidden from public view, but this social studies test and the science tests that are given in Colorado do not measure growth. They only measure achievement. And this social studies test doesn't even test each year, it's every third year. As we heard the CDE assessment director say, we're not getting the full breadth of this assessment anyway. While our statewide standardized tests might measure student achievement, they cannot be used to measure growth because they're not given constructively by grade level. As I've mentioned, we can reinvest savings into making our science test one that would be able to measure growth, as well as a way to support high-quality social studies instruction. We have spent a lot of time over the last several years to focus on improving civics instruction. I'm going to just review for you what we've done to show how much we value the instruction our students get in social studies, of which civics is only one of 4 components. We've mandated school fund civics instruction, including the history, culture, and social contributions of American Indians, Latinos, African Americans, and Asian Americans. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals within these minority groups, the intersectionality of significant social and cultural features within these communities, and the contributions and persecution of religious minorities. We've also added standards on the Holocaust and genocide. We enhanced financial literacy standards, we added media literacy standards, and in 2021, we legislated specifics of what would be taught in civics. And I'm hearing that we're doing a signaling thing here, and I'll agree. We are signaling to our students that we hear you. We know these tests and the time spent in them is not developmentally appropriate. We know that statewide testing can negatively impact student mental health. Students can experience increased anxiety, panic, irritability, frustration, boredom, headaches, and loss of sleep before, during, and after statewide testing. I urge an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Sarah Lundeen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You all have heard about the nation's report card. It's the NAEP test. It's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's a sampling test that is taken from across the country. It doesn't test every student the same way every year, but it is the touchstone for the understanding of education in America. Why is that important? Well, because that's exactly what the social studies test that we're doing away with here does for Colorado. It samples, it helps Colorado understand at a state level, as a matter of policy, how are we doing on social studies? Do we care about it? Of course we care about it. How are we doing? Well, the test that's being eliminated by this bill gives us some insight. It is not a growth metric for each individual student. It was never intended to be that, wasn't designed to be that, and is not that. It's simply for us, as the state of Colorado, to understand how are we doing on social studies in Colorado. Much like the nation's report card, the NAEP test lets the nation know how are the 50 states and the District of Columbia doing with regard to broader educational standards. It's a sample, it's a light touch. It's an inexpensive way to actually know how we are doing. Gone with this bill. The money saved is an argument. Well, the reality is it's a light touch, very low cost, high return on investment opportunity for us to know what's going on with regard to social studies. Why does that matter? That matters because civic behavior, civil behavior, as supported by a broader understanding of who we are as a society in this all-important science of social studies, is critically important. Now, you heard the prior speaker say, well, we've set these standards, and we've done this, and we've required that, and we've added this, and we've thought about that. Well, who's we in that context? Well, nobody knows. It's bread cast upon the water. You give 178 school districts some suggestions, some mandates, some whatever, and what result do you get? We will never know, because we are eliminating the one touch point we have that helps us understand how are we doing on answering those questions around all the sorts of things that we are continuously putting on the public education apparatus. Now, possibly the most alarming thing I've heard from the well in the course of this debate is an anti-testing desire. And I will tell you, the representative from the Colorado Education Association said, the opening statement, my opening premise, he didn't use quite this language, but he made it clear, my first thought is that we believe if you're testing, you're not teaching. And my response is, if you're not testing, who knows what you're teaching? So an anti-testing bias that wants to throw a critical social studies, civics engagement, civic understanding test away for the savings of $1.5 million on the pathway to throwing more tests away is absolutely not where we should be. We will spend $15 billion in public education in Colorado this year, all sources all in, probably a little more than that actually. We must know what's going on within that $15 billion industry. We must understand. And to throw one of the 4 pillars that we actually assess and understand at a statewide level on a light touch sampling basis test away is, in my mind, a substantial mistake. I suffer very little illusion that I'm going to move any votes in this chamber on this issue with regard to this bill at this moment. But I call out to the people of Colorado, if you care about civics, if you care about civil discourse, reach out as this bill passes on to the second chamber and make sure that your representatives know you care enough about civil behavior, civil discourse, the ability to understand how we, in an appropriate process where the majority gets its way and the minority gets its say, and its ability to engage in shaping better policy for the people of Colorado, you care that our children are being trained and educated, the history, the rich history of this unique civics experiment called the United States of America. And you want us to actually measure at a statewide level with a light touch, at a low expense, and very limited student disruption. You care to understand how we are doing as a state and that you object to Senate Bill 61. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Social studies education is extremely important. In fact, there are only 2 requirements for graduation that we have in state law. One of them is say no to drugs, and the other is a civics class. That is how seriously we take social studies education in this state. The reason that we have statewide testing is to ensure that folks across the entire state are learning, and that they are learning what it is that we, as a legislature, working with those local education providers, what we've decided is important. The testing that we have, other than this, is comparable and repeatable. That is why we conduct statewide testing. We want to be able to compare across geographies to make sure that kids are learning. We want to be able to repeat that over time to make sure that kids are learning. It is critical that we do that. This test is not comparable and not repeatable. This test is not conducted in a way that gives us the data that we need to really make sure that kids are learning the information that this test is testing. We're at a crossroads then. We could dramatically expand what is in this test, or we can let this one go and instead focus on that statewide testing that is giving us the data that we need to know that folks across the state are learning, to know that kids in Lamar are getting as good of an education as kids in Cherry Creek. We have to know that. We have to get that data. This test doesn't give that to us. I ask for an aye vote on this bill.
Senator Fields. Senator Fields.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I sit on the Education Committee and had the privilege of listening to the debate on this. And I can tell you, I get it. I get it as it relates to perhaps the cost savings that would be involved in eliminating this testing. It's a little over $600,000. I get that. I understand from some of the testimony that there is a tremendous amount of teachers' hours that is spent on assessing our students across the state. I get that. I understand that the Department of Education is in strong support of eliminating the social studies assessment. And they're saying because the data is not relevant enough for them to make any changes as it relates to actual performance within the school. I guess I get that as well. But what I'm having trouble with is the message that we're sending to our students, the message that we're sending to parents, because we know how important social studies is. Now, my bachelor's degree is in social sciences, and I have a degree in teaching. So you can consider that social studies is also a reflection of social sciences. And so basically what that makes up is, in social studies, you're learning government, you're learning civics, you're learning geography, you're learning the economics of what it takes to perform and to be a good citizen. You're also touching on anthropology, and you're also touching on history. Now, the Board of Education does not support continuing the assessment. They say it's not relevant. I say it is. Now, I get it. I know that each district is still teaching social studies, but what message are we sending when nationally we know there is attack on social studies? We know there's attack on history. And we can't be making decisions based on cost or based on convenience. Our kids are still dealing with the trauma after COVID. I don't know if you've read the reports I have, and our kids are experiencing severe learning loss. If you look at the data as it relates to reading, social studies is about reading. Because you have to read history, you have to read language and all the other things I mentioned. But we're cutting the assessment piece because it has no value as it relates to how it's orchestrated or administered when it gets down to the district level. And as a state, we get a chance to save a little money at the expense of the message that we're sending to kids about the value of social studies, the value of your history, the value of the importance of being engaged in our government and lending your voice to the inequities that you see. I was a yes vote in the committee. I will continue to be a yes vote. But the message to our educators and to our districts and to the Department of Education has to be clear about what we value. Because what we value is how you spend your money. And we've decided that we're going to save a little money at the expense of social studies assessment. Doesn't feel right to me. I have grandchildren. An assessment is to determine if our kids are meeting up to the standards that's already been defined. And we're going to cut it. Giving the authority, we like this, local control for districts to then to decide how they want to facilitate social studies, and it could be more immediate, maybe hands-on, whatever. But the message from the state of Colorado, we don't need to assess your understanding anymore as it relates to social studies. I think that's the wrong message to be sending to our kids as it relates to the value of knowing our society. It's important. So there may be a good rationale in reference to why, you've heard it, but is it the right message? I don't think so.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 61? Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm the Chair of Education, and during the committee hearing on this bill, we heard lots of testimony. And let me be clear, social studies is important. Social studies is crucial. I value it, and I know our districts and schools value it as well. We have required coursework in order to graduate from high school. As I think about this issue, I think about all the things we ask our schools, districts, and teachers to do. And we ask a lot of them. For example, just related to assessments, I think it's worth repeating what we ask to be assessed. School readiness assessments, READ Act assessments, English language proficiency assessments, English language arts assessments, math assessments, science assessments, PSAT, SAT, plus their own interim assessments, which are not required, but are a part of a good teaching and learning cycle to give diagnostic information about instruction and what needs to change on a regular basis. And in addition to assessments, right now, a strong focus on catching up in reading and math, as well as an increase in concurrent enrollment offerings and teachings, plus READ Act plans and requirements, and many other requirements for graduation and accountability attendance. Exhausting, right? And we talk a lot about what, if anything, can we do to help our teachers and decrease their workload. And then I think about the cost-benefit of the social studies test. My late husband was a social studies major, and we used to talk about social studies all the time. My granddaughter's favorite class is social studies. She's an honor roll student. She told me last week that she is tested weekly in social studies. She spends more time on her social studies homework than any other class. I have come to the conclusion that, given all that we do, this could be an item we remove in order to strengthen our resolve, attention, and focus on making up for lost learning opportunities, not only in social studies, but also science, ELE, and math. The other thing I want to mention, because this has come up several times today, in 2019, we established the History, Culture, Social Contributions, and Civil Government and Education Commission. I want to repeat that again. In 2019, we established the History, Culture, Social Contributions, and Civil Government and Education Commission. This commission makes recommendations to the State Board of Education in conjunction with the 6-year review of standards to ensure history and culture of marginalized groups is being included and updated in the standards. Yeah, I just happen to be a member of a marginalized group. So is Senator Fields. So are many of us. So this is important to me. In Colorado, we've worked hard to ensure our schools are prioritizing accurate information on the history and culture of all marginalized groups. Removing a standardized test given twice in a student's life is not going to change that commitment that we just talked about. I stand in strong support of this bill.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, first of all, that I agree with the good senator that spoke from Aurora when she made the comment that she agrees this is the wrong message to be sending to our kids. I agree. This is the wrong message. And the other good senator from Aurora, who said they only get tested twice. And my understanding is they actually get tested maybe 3 times, once in elementary, once in middle school, and once in high school. The bill would eliminate an already very flexible assessment for a crucial set of learned skills. Social studies is important. The good senator from Aurora had it right. What message are we sending when we say that we're not going to test you on social studies, where you will be learning about government, you will be learning about civics, what it takes, the economics to be a good citizen? I agree. What message are we sending? You're not going to learn about anthropology, which, by the way, was one of my favorite courses in high school, and history. Look around. We are in history. But gosh, we're not going to have our kids being tested on it because they don't want to, or it's just too much, or they've got other things to do. Our school system is failing. It is failing our kids, our students. They can't read. They can't do math. We're not going to test them on social studies. We did away with some testing yet last year. We just keep further degrading our public school system because, gosh, we're going to save $1 million. $1 million out of the close to $15 billion that's spent on education in our public school system in this state. Taking away the assessment tool for the knowledge that we need, that our students need in social studies, undermines that knowledge itself. Requiring an assessment for these skills ensures students are learning those critical thinking skills, that they're learning about history, that they are learning about history and government and civics. We have no assurance that they will be learning about history or about civics. If the assessments are pulled, it is up to the individual school districts to decide how to test their students on any new standards. My concern is that some districts may not prioritize testing in social studies since it would no longer be a state priority. We take away the testing assessment, we are saying, the message we are saying is, this isn't valuable, doesn't need to be tested, no longer a priority to us. We're saying, as the good senator from Aurora said, $1 million. We don't want to spend $1 million because it's not a state priority because it costs us $1 million. That's ridiculous. Our schools are failing our students. If we don't test, if we don't send and say it's a priority to have social studies, the likelihood of having legitimate, good social studies classes in our school system goes down. The likelihood of them being tested and having an understanding of what our history in this state is about goes away. That's wrong. That is wrong. Our students should be learning about the history of Colorado. They should be learning about the history of the United States. They should be learning about the history of their culture, of their society, of their ancestors. They should be learning about government, and we should be testing them to make sure that they do understand that. So for $1 million, we're just going to say it's not a priority. What is the message that we're sending? What message do you think we're sending with that? It's the wrong message. It's the wrong message to be sending to our constituents. It's the wrong message to be sending to students. And for goodness sakes, it's a wrong message to be sending to our school districts. Once, they get tested once in elementary school, once in middle school, and once in high school. That's it. I think it's worth $1 million. I would urge a no vote on this bill.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. It's essentially what this bill says. At a statewide level, a simple sampling assessment to understand where we are with regard, as a society, as a state, with regard to social studies, the standards we have set that have been codified by the State Board of Education, constitutionally created, duly elected board that helps us identify and say, these are the standards to which we will teach. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. This bill takes our statewide understanding and discussion of social studies standards as applied across the state off the table. We won't know. Now, some people would think, oh my gosh, I mean, quite frankly, some people think that the minute I approach the well every time. But what are they pitching such a fit about? The proponents of the bill say, this bill will reduce the burden of testing. This bill will save some money. This bill acknowledges the fact that this is not a growth metric test that tells us how a student is doing in their continuum from kindergarten through graduation in their understanding of social studies. We know that. This bill will take off the table in perpetuity an understanding at the state policy level of how we are doing, and therefore the conversation around what our standards for social studies should look like. I, in moments like this, think of the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, who said, and I will only give you the first stanza, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light, though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning. They do not go gentle into that good night." Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sarah
be
Marchman.
clear and put a point on this, Madam Chair.
Sarah Lundin.
Thank you very much for re-recognizing me. To be very clear, as if all my rhetorical flourishes might have gotten in the way, I think Senate Bill 61 is bad policy. And I urge, just this once, I urge that perhaps a vote might have been moved by the debate we have had on this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sarah Marchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify some misnomers that have come up. We are only testing this 2 times. The legislature decided 2 years ago to get rid of the high school social studies assessment. This has not been tested since 2019, and nor will the social studies test be tested again this year. I want to talk real briefly about why we're running this bill, because I think it's been a little muddied. This is not about teachers. This is not to give teachers some sort of relief. They're still going to have to go through the hours and hours and hours of preparation and work to prepare for this test. This is not about a diminished focus on social studies, as you've heard, and this is not about a perceived anti-testing bias, which I don't have. But this is definitely not about money. This is about the kids. Y'all, these children are between the ages of 9 and 14. I want to be clear, when I teach lessons, I am graded on how developmentally appropriate my lessons are. The attention span of these kids is 20 to 40 minutes. For each subject that we test them in, they take 2 to 3 modules of 110 minutes. Friends, that is completely developmentally inappropriate. It is completely developmentally inappropriate to test our sweet 9-year-olds and 14-year-olds for minutes and minutes and hours upon time. It is simply wrong. And that is why I'm here, and that's why we're bringing this bill. I just want to talk to you briefly about this perception of an anti-testing bias. I reject that. I like rules. That's, I think, why I'm here. I like to test with integrity, and when you read the Colorado growth model, which is in Article 2211, 2004, it says this. Colorado growth model says, we will calculate student annual growth in subjects included in statewide assessments. I think we're out of compliance with the Colorado growth model because we don't provide that for social studies or for science. So I'd like us to get right with science and do right by our kids. The final argument I have for you is this. This bill was unanimously supported by the State Board of Education, and I will say that is a bipartisan group. They stand firmly in favor of eliminating the statewide social studies assessment. I urge an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 61. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 61 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over Senate Bill 38 until Friday, March 3rd.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 38 to Friday, March 3rd. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 38 will be laid over until March 3rd. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1005?
House Bill 1005, Representatives Wilford and Datone, Senators Huckus, Lewis, and Marchman, concerning changes to the new energy improvement program and in connection therewith adding resiliency improvements and water efficiency improvements to the program, modifying the new energy improvement district's notice requirements, and removing the district's hearing requirement.
Senator Huckus, Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1005 and the corresponding Transportation and Energy Report.
Thank you. To the Transportation and Energy Report.
Yes, Madam Chair, we ran L004, which basically took the Colorado New Energy Improvement District out of the financing agreement.
The motion before us is the adoption of the Transportation and Energy Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Transportation Energy Report is adopted. To the bill.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Chair.
Hawkins Lewis.
CPAS financing basically makes large, clean energy more affordable for commercial and industrial building owners. It does two things. It expands the project eligibility, and I'll let my colleague talk about the second part.
Thank you.
Senator Marchman.
Oh, Madam Chair.
Senator Marchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. The CPACE assessment is voluntary, whereby the building owner or developer is specifically requesting the placement of the assessment lien on their property in exchange for CPACE financing. The second policy change would simply eliminate the 30-day notice period and public hearing requirement to make this process faster for our business owners and developers who want to implement green energy in their buildings.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1005? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1005. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and House Bill 1005 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over Senate Bill 60 to Friday, March 3rd.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 60 to Friday, March 3rd. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 60 will be laid over until Friday, March 3rd.
Will the clerk please read House Bill 1014?
House Bill 1014, Representative Bazenaker, Senator Winter F., concerning yielding to larger vehicles and roundabouts.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 1014.
There is an amendment on the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L002?
Amendment L002 by Senator Hinrichsen.
Senator Henriksen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. L002 shortens the size limits for these larger vehicles as defined in the bill from 40 feet to 35 feet. Outside of the Denver metro area, many of our urban transit agencies use a standard 35-foot bus. Pueblo is among them, Greeley is among them, and so is Grand Junction. So upon speaking with the stakeholders who are amenable to this, I kindly request that we accept L002 and shorten the length of the vehicles that are part of this bill from 40 feet to 35 feet. And I move the amendment.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for moving the amendment. Senator Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am also in support of this amendment.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L002. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1014. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 61 is amended, passed on second reading, and ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1005 is amended. House Bill 1014 is amended, passed on second reading, and ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 78 laid over until February 28, 2023, and retaining its place on the calendar. Senate Bills 38 and Senate Bill 60 laid over until March 3, 2023, and retaining their place on the calendar.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
The motion is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 61 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1005 is amended. House Bill 1014 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 78 laid over until February 28th and retaining its place on the calendar. Senate Bills 38 and 60 laid over until March 3rd and retaining their place on the calendar. Consideration of governor's appointments, consent calendar. Will the clerk please read all of the appointments listed on the consent calendar?
State Board of Human Services, effective March 1st, 2023, for terms expiring March 1st, 2027. Tamara Pogue of Dillon, Colorado, to serve as a county commissioner, reappointed. Jennifer McDonald of Los Animas, Colorado, to serve as a county commissioner, reappointed. John Cafalas of Fort Collins, Colorado, to serve as a county commissioner, reappointed.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the confirmation of all the appointments listed on the consent calendar, which includes members of the State Board of Human Services.
Is there any discussion? The motion is the confirmation of all the appointments on the consent calendar. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, those appointments are confirmed. Announcements. Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education Committee will meet at 1:30 in room 357. We have members of the Board of Trustees to be appointed, members of the Board of Trustees for Metropolitan State University, members of the Board of Trustees for Metropolitan State, and then we will also hear House Bill 1007 and 1064 in Education Committee today. Thank you. Oh, sorry about that. We will not hear Senate Bill 29.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow morning's Bible study again down in the basement with Pastor Dan File, so 7:15 in room 109. Thank you.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, Transportation and Energy will be meeting at 1:30 in 352, in room 352. We will be hearing 1051, 1134, and 1101.
Senator Hawkins Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just clarifying for local government and Senate Local Government Housing Committee for tomorrow, we'll meet at 2, room 352, clarifying that we have a House Bill 1023. It's up for action only because of calendar conflicts. And we will be also hearing Senate Bill 111, and we'll have one governor confirmation. Thank you.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, the Senate Judiciary Committee will be meeting promptly at 1:30 this afternoon in the Old Supreme Court. We will be hearing the calendar as it is printed. Members will be hearing appointments for the members of the Juvenile Parole Board, Senate Bill 67 for action only, and Senate Bill 97. Thank you.
Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd request a personal privilege, moment of personal privilege.
Grant.
Thank you. You know, the Super Bowl's been a few weeks back, and had some conversations down here with some of the staff, and I know this guy's a real, we talk a lot about his ties. We talk a lot about what a snappy dresser he is and his great sense of style and his ties. And he's not a Kansas City Chiefs fan. He's not a Mahomes fan. And so in honor of that, we have Mr. Dave Finetta, a Senate docket clerk, that I would like to gift this to. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further announcements, or whatever that was. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seeing no further announcements, I move that the Senate recess until 1 p.m. today. Colleagues, you do not need to return. We're simply reading bills across the desk.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will recess until 1 p.m. today.